Hello and welcome to News Center. I'm Parikshit Luthra. US President Donald Trump says he's doing a trade deal with India and praised Prime Minister Modi. Trump is in South Korea for the final leg of his Asia tour, which began in Malaysia, followed by Japan and South Korea. Trump said a trade deal with South Korea has been finalized and was also optimistic about a deal with China ahead of his scheduled meeting with President Xi Jinping tomorrow. While he sounded hopeful about a trade deal with India, Trump reiterated his disputed claim of personally averting a nuclear war between India and Pakistan. Trump claimed he stopped the conflict by using bilateral trade and told Prime Minister Modi, and I quote, "We can't make a trade deal with you. You're starting a war with Pakistan." End of quote. Before we discuss the prospects of an India-US trade deal, here's what President Trump had to say in South Korea.
And I called Prime Minister Modi. I said, we can't make a trade deal with you. No, we must make a trade deal. I said, no, we can't. You're starting a war with Pakistan. We're not going to do it. And then I called Pakistan. I said, we're not going to do trade with you because you're fighting with India. Prime Minister Modi is the nicest looking guy. He says, oh, and he looks like you'd like to have your father. Like, he's a killer. He's tough as hell. No, we will fight. I said, whoa, this is the same man that I know. But after a little while, and they're good people, and after literally 2 days, they called up and they said, we understand, and they stopped fighting. How is that? Isn't that amazing?
All right. It is important to also point out that India and European Union are negotiating a trade deal. In fact, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has just held talks with his counterpart, Maros Sefcovic, in Europe. And he has said that both sides have made substantial progress on outstanding issues as far as the negotiations with EU go. So it seems that both with the United States and EU, we are in advanced stages of negotiation. Joining us right now is former diplomat Gurjit Singh and former ambassador to the WTO, Jayant Dasgupta. Shashank, former foreign secretary and former Indian ambassador to Denmark, South Korea and Libya, is also with us. Thank you very much for being with us, gentlemen. Ambassador Gurjit, if I can begin with you. Let's start with the US. Donald Trump saying that I'm going to have a trade deal with India soon. From several quarters, we've been hearing that a deal now is in the final stages. It needs the blessings of Donald Trump and Prime Minister Narendra Modi. What do you think will be the right moment when this can happen? And what will be the victory that both sides would be looking at?
So if President Trump is once again saying that a trade deal with India is imminent, he's perhaps having a conditioned reflex, because in the last 3 days, he has signed so many trade deals, most one-sided ones, with countries of the region, that he's probably got used to rolling over people and saying, this is my trade deal. And people seem happy to sign it, even though this disadvantageous to them. Now, where India is concerned, it is my understanding that before President Trump went ballistic on India with regard to Russian oil and Pakistan, a trade deal was perhaps close to conclusion. And then it fell apart because additional requirements were projected, sanctions were placed because we were buying Russian oil. And this was not all part of the original discussion on the trade deal. Therefore, the trade deal now is much more complicated due to President Trump's various enunciations on Operation Sindoor, how he managed India and Pakistan, and on India should not do this with Russia, and cozying up to Pakistan, and now cozying up to China, all of which is geopolitically unhappy space for us. So from a sweet spot of early in the Trump administration to a bitter spot is where we find ourselves. So therefore, I think unless a trade deal is fully negotiated and ready to be signed, I don't think it is done.
Right. That's an important point. Let me get in Ambassador Dasgupta at this point. Ambassador Dasgupta, and as Ambassador Gurjit was pointing out, Donald Trump has got the one-sided deals with Thailand, with Cambodia, with other nations, just the way he wanted to. With India, that is going to be difficult because India wants a competitive edge with the average tariff compared to a Bangladesh, a Sri Lanka, a Cambodia, a Thailand, or an Indonesia for that matter. Do you think what has happened over the last few days, there is momentum for a trade deal, or is it going to be difficult for exactly this reason?
I think I have read something in the papers quoting President Trump saying that we will have something like 15% or thereabouts for India. So that is something which India would be looking for as a prerequisite for signing any deal. That this 50% of that, 25% is for buying Russian oil. That has to be rolled back for sure. There is no compromise on that. And the balance 25%, which was imposed with effect from the 7th of August, reciprocal tariff, that has to be reduced substantially. So I think India can accept perhaps 15% or so, because most countries have 15% at least or more. And Vietnam and Indonesia, Cambodia, all the others, they are all in the region of 19-20%. So I think balance would be restored if that happens. But having said that, there are two other issues. One is about this agricultural products. If the Trump administration makes a big deal out of that, about trying to push in GM soya and corn and the other GM products, that I think will be a no-go. So that will probably spook the whole deal. Of course, from the statements emanating from both the Commerce Secretary, who was in Washington about a week ago, and from the Minister, Commerce Minister, it appears that they are close to concluding the talks. But then one also gets to hear what Minister Jaishankar had to say at the ASEAN meeting. And he said that, it is time for the world to stop having double standards and a difference between what they preach and what they practice. And obviously the target was both the US as well as the EU, which are sanctioning countries or entities which trade with Russia for oil and gas. But while they continue to buy Russian oil and gas, in the case of the EU, and uranium for energy purposes for the US.
All right, let me get Ambassador Shashank, who's joining us right now, former Foreign Secretary. Ambassador Shashank, thank you for being with us. My question to you would be, there seems to be still no understanding of India's sensitivities around the recent India-Pakistan conflict. Donald Trump has, even today, while speaking to business leaders in South Korea, he's gone on to say that he stopped the war. He spoke to both the leaders, both the Indian and Pakistan prime ministers wanted to continue fighting, but he told them that I won't do trade if you don't stop fighting. And then they stopped. But he also praised Prime Minister Modi. He said that I really like Prime Minister Modi. He's a really nice guy. He's a hell of a tough guy. He's the kind of guy you want to have as your father. Is that a olive branch? Or do you feel those repeated references to the India-Pakistan conflict make it difficult, politically difficult for the Prime Minister to agree to a trade deal?
Firstly, I would say that it's the uncertainty about the tariff issue which affects the bilateral trade much more than the actual tariff which has been imposed, because even if they want to have 50% or 15%, the commodities which can still be sold in the American market perhaps will go. The others will find alternative markets over a period of time. There will be pain, naturally, for the exporters and for the manufacturers. But the point is that the way the tariffs have been introduced from time to time, and still there remains that uncertainty, that brings the whole issue of the exporters and importers not being able to plan their trading relationship. So I think that is something which is very important for President Trump. As a businessman, he should understand that the market should be kept stable. The number two is that as regards the India-Pakistan end of conflict, I think India has very clearly said that Operation Sindoor is still on. So whether that particular phase of fighting ended and who all were responsible. Maybe President Trump says that he was able to convey some views to Pakistan not to use the nuclear weapons, because Pakistan has been repeatedly saying earlier and even now also that they would use the nuclear weapon because they feel that Pakistan's existence is under threat. Now, Pakistan's existence is under threat because of their own domestic issues and their problems with all their neighbors. So they should not try to put it on India and convey to President Trump and hand him over the mines and the oils and all kinds of things in order to ensure that President Trump's family gets involved into these political affairs,
Right.
which have been very complicated in this region.
Okay. Important points. Let me get in Ambassador Gurjit as well. Ambassador Gurjit, does India have a choice here? Can we live without a trade deal? Because now there is ample commentary from the World Bank, from the IMF, that if India does not get a positive trade deal, and if these tariffs at 50% continue, this is going to impact India's GDP growth. For next year, they've downgraded India's GDP growth by about 0.2 or 0.3%. Going forward, if we don't have a deal and we continue with the tariffs, will this continue impacting India's GDP growth on a year-on-year basis?
Indeed, a very important question. And this is why we can't do the kind of deal several ASEAN countries have done, who have simply opened their markets to American products at 0%. So India can't do that. That is one essential difference between India and the others. Similarly, unlike South Korea or Japan or even the EU, India cannot promise hundreds of billions of dollars of investment into the United States to offset low tariffs. So India is a unique case by itself. Now you ask me, can we survive? I think if you can reduce the sanctioned 25% for buying Russian oil, then you are in a negotiating stage of bringing it down from 25% to about 15-16%, which is what is reported in the press. But as Ambassador Shashank correctly says, it is the uncertainty. But uncertainty not only of the Trump administration, it is the uncertainty of Indian exports competitiveness, which is severely lacking. Now, in Trump 1.0, they remove all the GSP benefits, impacting all our traditional exports like leather, textiles, gems and jewelry, and things like that. It was about a $5.6 billion hit to our exports. We did not squeak much. We absorbed that hit. Even today, I know that Indian companies exporting to the US have adjusted the increased tariffs either into their price or by raising consumer prices. And they seem to be finding a way out. I think this requires a very great analysis of whether India's critical engagements on semiconductors, electronics, on solar, on energy, on defense products, on buying aircraft and pharmaceutical exports, among others, can they be somehow saved from this excessive punitive tariffs, where textiles...
Right. Okay, I'm going to come to that. Ambassador Dasgupta, what we hear that India is trying to work on one comprehensive landing zone which tackles both the 25% additional penalty because of purchase of Russian oil and also the 25% reciprocal tariff. The hope is that the landing zone will be in the average tariff rate of 10 to 15%. Do you think we can give some concessions on agriculture? There have been a lot of reports about how the US is seeking access for US corn, soybean, corn for India's ethanol industry. Could some concessions be made? Could some small contracts be given? Can we give concessions in niche areas? Or do you feel that it will be politically very difficult to do so in an election environment?
think it would be very difficult, my personal opinion, that agriculture, after having taken a tough stand and announced it several times that there would be no compromise, and the Prime Minister himself has mentioned it, that we will not bargain away the interests of the farmers and the fishermen, etc. So I think it would be just not possible, apart from the economic impact it may have on our farmers. So I think on these two issues, GM soya and corn, I don't perceive any compromise. And of course, India has, on the other hand, held out an olive branch in the form of increased, I think, oil and gas imports from the US. So it should more than compensate for the perceived, lack of market access that the US may think is suffering from in terms of soya and corn and a few other things.
Okay.
So that is there.
Okay, I'll put the final question to Ambassador Shashank because I'm running out of time. Ambassador Shashank, do you feel that the Russian sanctions will in a way help India? Because India was not ready to compromise on the strategic partnership with Russia. We were getting discounts, very compelling discounts by Russian refiners through third-party intermediaries and also directly. Now that these sanctions have been imposed, it'll be difficult to do business with Russia on oil post the 21st of November. Do you think the biggest irritant in talks is now off the table?
Well, Indian companies have taken their own decision that they would like to abide by the sanctions which have been imposed on the Russian oil. So that be it. I think India will go for the most economical sources for the oil because we import almost 85% of our oil requirement. And therefore, it would be unfair for the United States or for any other country to say that India should buy only more expensive oil and not the oil which is available at the most economical rates in the market. And I think this is affecting the Indian growth story. It's also affecting the credibility of the United States as a long-term partner with India. So I think really we have to negotiate with the United States, and we find several times that even their ministers and officials are helpless because they say that, okay, go and talk to the president. No, I don't think that's the way to deal in these international relations, that today it is Russia, then some Lindsey Graham goes into the Senate or somewhere and says, no, now it's BRICS, and we have to hit any country which is a member of BRICS. So I think the whole thing is very uncertain, and I think the United States is not performing its role as a responsible superpower. I think they need to change their attitude.
Absolutely. And there are reasons, of course, which make it difficult for India to accept the kind of terms being offered to other economies around the world by the United States. We've run out of time, but thank you very much to Ambassador Gurjit Singh, Ambassador Shashank and Ambassador Dasgupta for being with us here on News Center. We're taking a short break, but lots more coming up on CNBC TV18 when we return.